In the face of challenges, Mark Swanson had always crumbled. He craved something more, despite his comfortable life and loving wife, but he wasn't sure what it was. The routine of his daily life suffocated him, and he longed for something else. When his wife gave birth, he knew he had to accept the life he had chosen, but things would turn out badly. The doctor told Jane that her baby was stillborn because of complications during birth. Overwhelmed, Mark jumped up and headed for the door. Mark walked away from everything he knew despite the doctor's stern warning. After packing a backpack with some cash, he disappeared into the unknown. The sudden departure of his husband devastated his wife, who did not know where he went or where he was. Mark encountered many people and situations along the way on his journey, which was filled with ups and downs. As much as he hated losing his wife, he was determined to find the freedom and excitement he had always desired. Several months had passed since Jane last saw her husband, and she had no idea where he was. Despite numerous attempts to contact him, she was unable to do so. A courier delivered the divorce papers to her one day. When she tried to discuss their separation with Mark, he wouldn't even come to see her in person. Without knowing what to do next, Jane felt helpless and devastated by the unexpected turn of events. There was a lot on the shoulders of the still grieving woman. She didn't know what to do. There was one thing, however, that her now ex-husband did not know. He lacked critical information. A feeling of emptiness developed in Mark as time passed. There were many things he missed, including his old life, his wife, and his home. It dawned on him that he had been running away from his problems rather than facing them. Crawling back, he decided to return. Mark returned to his old neighborhood a year after he had left. His sudden appearance made him nervous, and he worried about his wife's reaction. Feeling a mixture of nostalgia and regret, he walked down the familiar streets. He saw her then. He saw his wife walking towards him, looking as beautiful as ever. Seeing him, she stopped, her face a mix of surprise and anger. A lump formed in Mark's throat. There was nothing he could say. After abandoning his wife without a word, he realized how selfish he had been. "I'm sorry, Jane. I shouldn't have left like that. My actions were foolish and immature." "Can you forgive me?" he asked. After looking at him for a moment, Jane nodded. "My forgiveness doesn't mean I'm taking you back. There's something you should understand." Jane's smile baffled Mark. It was clear that he had been misinformed. He realized how stupid he had been once his ex-wife revealed the truth behind everything. For the rest of his life, he would regret leaving her. Due to the absence of a father figure in her life, Jane Ross had a difficult childhood. Having lost her parents when she was just 3 years old, her mother had to take care of her alone. Jane's mother made sure to take care of and provide for her, despite the challenges they faced. Her goal was to provide a stable home environment and instill in Jane a sense of independence and resilience. Jane grew up in a happy home without a father and became an accomplished and successful individual. As a single mother raising young Jane all by herself, the situation put an immense amount of pressure on her. Their struggles were many, but they persevered through all the challenges that came their way. Despite the difficulties they faced, they never lost hope and continued to move forward with grit and determination. Little did Jane know that the future would mirror her childhood in many ways, and she would have to face similar challenges once again. As Jane grew older, she realized that life wasn't easy. Her mother was a single parent struggling to make ends meet. Jane knew that if she wanted to help her mother, she had to take matters into her own hands. So she decided to find a part-time job working in retail. Though the job wasn't glamorous, it meant that they could afford groceries at the end of the month. Jane worked hard and made sure to save every penny she earned. She knew that every little bit helped, and that she was making a difference in her family's life. As Jane progressed through her school years, she displayed exceptional academic performance, displaying a passion and natural talent for learning. Her hard work and dedication paid off. One day, Jane got word that she had received a scholarship to attend her preferred university, fulfilling a lifelong dream. However, Jane never forgot those who had supported and encouraged her along the way. She eagerly began her studies, excited to expand her knowledge and pursue her goals. But she had no idea that everything was about to crumble around her. Unfortunately, tragedy struck during her first year of university when she received a devastating phone call. It was news of her mother's sudden hospitalization, and Jane's world crumbled. Despite the immense emotional turmoil, she remained steadfast in her determination to persevere and complete her studies, even in the face of such a profound loss. Her mother passed away peacefully with Jane at her side. She was choked up about it, but she knew her mother had lived a long and healthy life by the time she went to heaven at 73. But sadly, it would have other repercussions. Jane found it hard to motivate herself after her only family member had passed away. Her marks slipped, and she lost her scholarship. This meant that her fate was sealed. She imagined that she would be stuck working retail for the rest of her life, without any purpose. But then she met Mark. Mark was like a beacon shining in the dark. The two hit it off quickly, and she couldn't keep him out of her mind. Eventually, the two of them started dating, and things escalated quickly. After 6 months of dating, Mark popped the question to Jane. Through tears, Jane said yes, and the two were engaged with plans to get married. A year after their engagement, the two had a beautiful wedding, and despite Jane not having any family to walk her down the aisle, she was the happiest she had ever been. The happy couple eventually moved into their own house. Mark earned a fair bit more than Jane, but she was doing something that her husband didn't know about. When Jane had free time, she would lend some of her talents to jewelry making. She made beautiful and intriguing combinations of relatively affordable gems. She would have told Mark, but she knew he would think she was being silly. He was very touchy about income and wanted to be the clear breadwinner. But things were going to go up in flames before they knew it. One day, Jane had brilliant news for her husband. When he came home, she told him that she was pregnant. She expected Mark to be happy, but she was surprised to see him nearly collapse. That was when she first realized that he couldn't handle intense situations. As Jane's pregnancy progressed, she expected Mark to be the caring and compassionate husband he had been up until this point. But things started changing just a few months into her pregnancy. He started coming home later and always made up excuses. It was clear that he wasn't handling the situation well. Jane spoke to Mark about his behavior on multiple occasions, but it didn't seem to help. He was dead set on abandoning her during her pregnancy. But the worst was still to come. Her due date approached, and she felt like she would have to rely on herself more than anyone else. But she would be proven wrong. Finally, the day arrived, and Jane called Mark, who was at work. She didn't know whether or not she could rely on her husband, but to her surprise, he was there in an instant and drove her to the hospital. After hours of labor, she thought it would be the happiest day of her life. Only things wouldn't be like she imagined. It was clear that something was wrong when the doctor and nurses rushed the baby out of the hospital room. Jane was hysterical, but no one would tell her what was going on. Eventually, a doctor came back in with sadness in his eyes. "I'm so sorry to tell you this, but your baby is stillborn." It was the worst news any parent could ever hear. Jane's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. She wept for the life that she had protected and nurtured for the last 9 months. But when she looked to her husband for comfort, he did the unimaginable. Mark got up and left the room. Jane had no idea where he was going. The doctor and nurse warned him to wait, but he wouldn't. She was left alone in the hospital room to grieve while he disappeared. But he had no idea what he was about to miss. Once Jane was finally discharged from the hospital, she came back to an empty home. What was worse was that Mark's clothes and possessions were all gone. Jane felt the pain of losing someone and collapsed onto her floor, crying. How could he do this to her? But it was only going to get worse. After a few months, she was served with divorce papers. The coward wouldn't even face her himself. Jane signed them, not knowing what else to do. Clearly, he didn't love her anymore, or the pain of the loss of a child was too much for him. Either way, it was all finalized. She only ever saw his lawyer, who helped settle the estate. Thankfully, Jane had an unlikely backup. Mark probably thought Jane would have to move into a tiny flat and live uncomfortably. But that wasn't the case at all. Jane's jewelry business had picked up considerable momentum, and she was making a tidy profit off of it. It wasn't enough to live lavishly, but between that and her retail job, it was enough to be happy. But the unexpected would happen a year after everything was said and done. One day, Jane bumped into someone she never thought she'd see again. It was a year after Mark had left her all alone, but now she was looking at him. Something was different. He looked older and disheveled. He looked miserable. That's when his eyes lit up. "I'm sorry, Jane. I shouldn't have left like that. I was foolish and immature. Can you forgive me?" he said, his voice low. She couldn't believe it. Not only had he come crawling back, but he had the audacity to ask for her back. She smiled and said, "I forgive you, Mark, but that doesn't mean I'm taking you back. There's something you should know." That was when Jane pulled out her phone and showed him a photo that made him regret ever leaving her. It was a photo of Jane holding a small infant. He looked 6 months old. "This is our son. You should have waited for the doctor to confirm his death." They thought he was stillborn, but after a few minutes, they managed to get him breathing. "It was a miracle you didn't stick around to see," she said with conviction in her eyes. Mark collapsed with tears in his eyes. "So I won't ever get to see him?" He wept. But Jane wasn't that heartless. She had full custody of little Jeremy, but she let Mark see him once a month. It was enough for the man to turn his life around and change for the better.